Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Culture. I'm Scott, joined by Ewan.
Hello.
Ewan, my friend. Hello.
Hello there.
One of our favourite interstellar space combat men seems to be returning, and his feet were already in the original season of The Mandalorian. Now, we need to talk about all things Boba Fett. I don't know where you want to start, but we have theories and facts and different things, so dive in from whichever angle you would like.
Yeah, exactly. So last week, The Hollywood Reporter dropped a big bombshell at Temuera Morrison, who of course played Jango Fett in the prequels, and also has lent his voice to all sorts of different clone-related characters in various video games. He basically replaced the original Boba Fett actor to play him in the updated versions of the original trilogy as well. They announced that he's actually going to be in The Mandalorian Season 2, and he will actually be playing Boba Fett. There was also some rumours from CineLink saying that he could actually be playing more characters there as well. So we'll obviously get into that. I personally think he could be playing Captain Rex as well, or some other clones. We'll get into the how and why of how we think he's returned in a little bit, because first we need some context. Because obviously, if you're a Star Wars fan, you might be thinking, "Oh, Boba Fett, didn't he get like
a bit gobbled,
hunted into the Sarlacc, and get like the Sarlacc did that little burp as well after he, which implies." The thing about the burp, Scott, that makes no sense, right, is that you're meant to be digested painfully over the course of 1,000 billion years in this thing. Him burping, the Sarlacc burping implies that he's right there.
The evidence has been there all along.
Cheeky, unless Boba Fett was particularly gassy, which, I mean, he had the jetpack on, so...
Maybe it was Boba Fett who burped back then, and it's always been him. The evidence has always been there.
What do you think of him returning first off?
Well, I mean, the thing with Boba Fett, like, I always thought, because I have a bunch of friends, I think including you, that absolutely love Boba Fett. I was always more of a Jango man, but I think that's because I played as Jango in Bounty Hunter, which is one of my favourite Star Wars games. I know, best 6 out of 10 game ever. But in the same regards to Boba, his reputation like precedes him, and so I always think that he took off more because of the action figure, the limited run that they did back in the day, and what he looked like, and the fact that an entire generation of people grew up with the action figures and the toys, and just seeing him be this cool dude that dropped into a film and then disappeared. Whereas for me, when I was growing up, I just saw him as this kind of guy that flew into a wall and died and got eaten and burped, and I was like, well, whatever. So like, I'm glad that they can actually do something with him that's more fleshed out. I know he's popped up in different things, Dark Empire and whatever, but yeah, he's kind of the OG, and if you're going to do something cool with a Star Wars bounty hunter, it should be Boba.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Mandalorian to me, like, kind of craps all over, but not in a bad way. I mean, I don't care for Boba in the first place. The fact that the Mandalorian basically realizes, he has the substance to match the style, and that's what I really like about Din Djarin as a character. I think the show kind of basically, if Boba Fett had something to do, that would be what the Mandalorian TV show was. But yeah, totally. I'm kind of apathetic at the moment, but I'm also excited by the possibilities, this may have. Star Wars, and Dave Filoni in particular, has a habit of making really good arcs out of characters who were wasted in the films. He's just finished the Clone Wars, where he basically transformed Maul from being this, a really interesting villain in The Phantom Menace who was completely wasted by the end of it, into one of the most epic and nuanced Star Wars characters ever in that show. So, I have high hopes for what he'll actually do with Boba. But yeah, for the past 5 years, Boba Fett has basically been Schrodinger's Mandalorian. There was a whole thing with Lucasfilm Story Group basically operating under the assumption that Boba is simultaneously alive and dead inside the Sarlacc. And there was a rumour, in Star Wars Aftermath by Chuck Wendig, there is actually a cheeky little reference to Boba about him potentially escaping the Sarlacc. They mentioned that they come across a sandcrawler by the Jawas, and it has melted Mandalorian armour, which implies that the Beskar steel, as it were, actually helped him kind of survive. If it is Beskar steel, it probably isn't. It's painted green and yellow, whatever. But yeah, in the Legends continuity, which, by the way, just going up and brushing up on my Legends knowledge through Wikipedia gave me 55 aneurysms this morning. It makes no sense. He basically managed to escape the Sarlacc by, through virtue of his armor and his blasting capabilities and his jetpack and whatever. But he also made telepathic contact with another of the Sarlacc's victims, who then also could control the Sarlacc, and then that's how he got out. It's really confusing.
Was it Mako Spence?
It wasn't Mako Spence, no.
Damn
I mean, you can throw a picture up of Mako Spence somewhere. It kind of reminds me of like a rejected Die Hard villain concept, maybe. But yeah, so that happens. And I think, for now, we can probably operate under the assumption that Boba Fett having returned, kind of a little bit of this legend story will probably come into play. Obviously, it's not canon, but I would imagine they will tell a variation of it where Boba Fett threw a thermal detonator and the Sarlacc burped him up or something like that.
I think, I guess that, like, I wonder whether they'll address the burp thing, because, like, it's such a small detail. But at the same time, you could make it so that the Sarlacc ate a little bit of his armor. He got away anyway. Like I said before, they've played with the idea of him surviving in the background for a while. And I guess we should note that in Mandalorian Season 1, it seems like you see his feet at one point.
Yes, he does appear at the end of Episode 5. It was rumored, but basically, no other Star Wars character makes those spurs sound effects other than Boba, so everyone kind of assumed that it was him. So there was some speculation that it might have been Moff Gideon, but now with this news in mind, that doesn't really make sense.
I guess in terms of fleshing out the second season as well, like, you have the iconic actor coming back. I mean, I know that they redubbed the old movie so that you had him doing the voice and stuff. I guess, what do you want to see from that? Do you think that it'll take the spotlight away from the actual Mandalorian?
No. I think this is really interesting, because obviously we heard the other week that they are actually planning a third season of Mandalorian as well. I think there is a big overarching thing going on here, and while the Hollywood Reporter's article from last week does say that he's only expected to have a small role as Boba in the second season, I do think this is building up to something quite big, because if you remember, in the first season of The Mandalorian, there was a character called Dr. Pershing who is with Werner Herzog's character. It's like, where is the baby?
Oh, yeah.
Bring me the baby. The guy who's with him, he actually has a Kaminoan clone patch on his uniform, which to me raises all sorts of interesting implications when you think about the state of the Imperial Remnant and why they might be interested in cloning. Remember, we still don't know why they wanted the child in the first place, which is kind of a big thing to consider. And my theory, the theory that I'm operating under right now, as to why Temuera Morrison is involved in the second season, is I think that potentially Moff Gideon or some other Imperial forces at play, obviously Moff Gideon, considering he was the one who was bossing around old Werner Herzog. I think he's trying to basically make his new clone army for the Empire, and Boba Fett will either be assisting him in the kind of cloning process, or he might be going, hey, that's my DNA. You don't get to move around with my DNA. And maybe that's where you get almost like for a few dollars more fragile alliance going on between the man with no name stand-in for Mandalorian, or, the man in black stand-in for Boba Fett. And I would love to see those two come together to maybe disrupt the Empire's attempt at getting a new clone army. And that would explain why Temuera Morrison is rumored to have multiple roles. And, he could be playing all sorts of different clones, or he could even be playing Captain Rex, who, as we know from Star Wars Rebels, was involved with the Rebel Alliance. I imagine he was involved with the New Republic as well. So all sorts of exciting possibilities. And that's my main theory right now, is that I think cloning technology has some sort of role in here, going off what we saw in Season 1, and that is the main thrust of why I would imagine Boba Fett would be involved in this story.
Plus, like you said, I mean, you talked about the Clone Wars before, sort of retroactively improving the prequels. You could do so much more with Kamino, and the idea that it was a bigger threat, and that, even after things were thwarted in Episode 2, like, you could, like you said, you could do the thing with Boba where he's been trying to find a way to take things down for good in the background, and finally he comes back across our main Mandalorian and do things like that. I guess iconically, it's going to be cool to potentially, even just see two sets of this armor on screen at the same time. And there's things that they can do in a fun fan-based way, like just, pure wish fulfillment stuff. But the theory side of it sounds cool. I didn't even notice that guy's patch. Too busy distracted by Baby Yoda, which I forgot was a thing.
We are actually going to Baby Yoda's planet in the next one, so that'll be exciting as well. It's juggling a lot of different things, but I do think, in the grand lore of Star Wars, we know that the Empire shifted away from cloning. I can't remember why they moved away from it. They opted to just pursue normal human recruits rather than clones. In the original Star Wars Battlefront 2 video game, you actually play as the 501st as they take down the Kaminoans, who kind of go rogue, even though in the new continuity they're kind of involved with Sidious's scheme from the start. So I'm curious to see, the reason why they would start a new clone army is because, they're short of manpower. The Imperial Remnant is basically a ragtag band of, just kind of different forces kind of cobbled together. So I kind of think, that the main reason why, this is complete conjecture on my behalf, but I do think that the reason why Boba is returning is because there is something to do with cloning going on, and if Morrison is going to be playing multiple characters, that kind of confirms that there are going to be clones involved.
Well, yeah, and in terms of like finding sort of unanswered questions from the movies that you can flesh out with this new lore, I think Rogue One did one of the best examples of that, of just explaining how they got the Death Star plans. I like the idea of, like you said, why did the Empire move away from cloning? Maybe there's a whole load of stuff you can explore there, and a writing team could pick that apart.
I completely agree. There was also something else. Oh yeah, the idea of them both being adoptive Mandalorians as well is really interesting, because obviously Din Djarin was rescued by Death Watch. We get that really good, awesome flashback to the Clone Wars where Death Watch kind of come in and rescue him. But Django himself was never a Mandalorian, and Boba Fett was never a Mandalorian. So I wonder if there's going to be some sort of tension at play there. He's wearing the armor, but he has none of the value attached to earning Beskar, or actually he hasn't suffered with the rest of the Mandalorians underneath, in the sewers or whatever. So there's an interesting potential relationship at play there.
That was some of my favorite stuff in season 1, was like the sort of hidden culture of it. Like I actually don't know the name of the character, but the woman that had the big fur coat thing and the cool axe and everything, the hammer thing, she was a complete badass, and I want to see more of that. I want to see different armor variations and different sort of cultural traits that flesh out Mandalorianism, I guess, and things like that. But do you have any more other closing thoughts, or do you want to leave people wondering?
That's basically it at the moment. I have nothing else to articulate other than I think we know that Boba somehow got out of the Sarlacc, whether he destroyed it or whatever is something completely up in the air. And I do think if Morrison is rumored to play multiple roles, that implies the existence of a clone force, which in my mind would potentially mean that the Empire are looking to resurrect their own clone army, and Boba Fett is either helping them do that or he's against doing that. And I'm kind of hoping for the latter option, because it means we could get a really cool remake of for a few dollars more, except instead of Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef, it's Temuera Morrison and Pedro Pascal, which would be awesome.
Is there a better sentence in the English language than the thing that you've just said? I don't think so.
No,
Other
I don't
than
think so either.
explain the Sarlacc burp. But let us know what you think down in the comments below. How do you want the burp to be explained? Would you like it to be a piece of armor or Mr. Boba Fett's leg? We'll see what you think. For now, though, I've been Scott from What Culture.
I've been Ewan from What Culture.
I'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.